Today I want to talk about three simple things that we went through in class for about 2 weeks, and designed especially for a simple method of getting qi to flow through particular parts of the body. And the way we began talking about it was that a lot of people have arthritic type of problems, either in their hands, their forearms, or their shoulders. So we started going through those three areas with an idea of how can we do something really simple, available to everyone, but is really going to give our health a major boost. And a side benefit is that if you can incorporate these into doing your postures, either Qigong or in Tai Chi, that very same movements incorporated into those arts are really going to improve your art a lot. So the first thing we talked about was the hands, which you would think we would have most control over because we use them all day long. But a lot of people either collapse their hand or they have a lot of tension in their arms, and both of these will stop the flow of blood and qi. So the first simple thing that we do is just open the hand. And as simple as a movement like that. Now, doing that, the hand is open, but I don't have a lot of stretch going on into it. So to benefit us even more, by very slightly lengthening, I'm lengthening my thumb and each individual finger as I do this, and now I can feel a stretch coming through the palm and even down into my forearm a little bit. So this is a really good thing to do. And it's something you can do anytime. If you're walking or even if you're driving, you really only need one hand most of the time. Or if you're sitting at a red light, you just open your hands. So on this hand, I have considerable damage. And so it's something that I do all the time. And so far, my hand's condition have pretty much even improved. So taking this to another level, what we talked about is we want to extend this stretch and extend the flow of qi that we're getting. So the next stop on it is to give ourselves a heavy elbow. And that's dropping the elbow straight down, as I said in the article, and then pointing the fingers straight up. So if you can actually make your elbow quite heavy, I'm using my other palm as an aid. I'm just dropping the arm onto it. And my elbow, my whole arm feels really, really heavy right now. So what that gives us is that by having what amounts to a downward pull accompanied by an upward stretch, the entire unit through here starts to stretch open. And this arm positioning just happens to be very correct for Qigong and for Tai Chi both. So that was the second thing we tried to do, was to give ourselves a heavy elbow. And if you can maintain that heavy elbow as your arm is moving forward and backward a little bit, this of course shows up in push posture, it shows up in single whip, it shows up in fan through back, many, many different postures, even as we're going into single whip. This kind of movement, the palm's facing me, but it really doesn't make any difference. If I can get that attribute of reaching into my fingers, making my elbow heavy, then this entire area, the forearm and the hand both, are flooded with qi and blood. And if you can make that your default. So if you're just walking, the motion would be keep the elbow released, as always, sink your shoulder a little bit, and then create a stretch that goes down into your fingers, and that engages the entire arm. So in the article, we mostly talked about an arm position like this, and the next thing we talked about was, can you stretch from your shoulder down into your elbow along this line, and this line. What that does is it opens this part of my back. It does a lot of work in the chest area, and the support areas here are affected by it as well. So it's beginning to be fairly encompassing, not just the arm anymore. But what I talked about in the article was as if your shoulder is being pressed down by an outside force. So not you doing it, because we don't want you to tighten up. And then again, a heavy elbow. So now I have a heavy shoulder, I have a heavy elbow, and I'm creating a stretch here. Now with my reach going up, I've actually got quite a few stretches going on, but the main two are here and then up through here. And of course that, done on this plane, that's exactly push posture. Okay, so this is going to lead to you being able to create the hum energy of Tai Chi. But important for what we're talking about right now is that by dropping your shoulder and creating an alive stretch down into your heavy elbow and then up into your hand, the whole area up through here, it's quite a big area that's being affected now, and this is all aiding in circulating qi through those areas. So Master Leong used to talk quite a bit about a full circulation of qi, and that if we did one round of Tai Chi, we should have circulated our qi everywhere in the body, but we have to know how to do that. And this versus these kind of movements, this is locked, that's floating, so it's kind of a dead area, and the alignment in this area is all wrong. We need to do our movements not only with proper principles, but along the actual lines of the meridian, which actually flow down this way. So this is breaking lines. You're actually out of a joint here, and that broke right there, and the line also broke right there. Your line now is here, rather than a continuous line going through the arm. So quite important. Then the next thing we talked about, the second simple thing, this is something that we do in almost every class. We talk about raising the head as if something here is pulling your head upward, something here, right in this place where most of us have a little bend, that's also being pulled upwards. So you've got the two of these going up, accompanied by a very small chin tuck. And what that does, right now I can feel a huge stretch on the back of my neck. Now if I also incorporate dropping my shoulders as if, again, as if they're being pulled into a sloping downward position, I not only have the stretch on the back of my neck, but in through here, I have a huge release of tension, and of course that results in a lot of qi flowing in through that area. So another thing I mentioned in the article is the chest and back. And those are a little bit hard if you haven't been exposed to the way of teaching that I do. But basically, if somebody was to put their hand on your chest and then press slightly inwards and downwards like this, not overpowering strength, just enough to help you loosen the area, what happens with that is that the chest begins to root. That is, it's pulled downwards through our body and down into the ground, which is correct. Every part of the body should root, because rooting is a major attribute of Tai Chi and Qigong, and we have to have clear pathways through the body. For instance, going back to this movement again, this arm can't root. There's no pathway to the ground. Anytime your elbows are up, or if your hands are broken like that, there's no clear pathway to the ground. So by dropping the shoulders, that allows us to sink the chest. By dropping the elbow, that helps with both. And then with the chest slightly going in, probably you'll find that your upper back right now, at least to shoulder blade level, is rounding slightly outwards. Now this part's a little bit tricky. As your arm is doing this kind of a movement, it's like a lever movement. What should be happening on your back, you can feel this in your shoulder blade usually, is that it's being pulled downwards. So that's the effect that we want. We want to be able to root all parts of the body. So if you look at this as kind of a mechanical system, the hand is actually being pushed upwards by the sink of the shoulder and the elbow, and it's that lever that I'm creating that actually provides quite a bit of the power for this movement. Rather than tightening up and using external strength, we do it as a whole body movement. And that again goes to anywhere where your hand is out in this kind of a position, even into press position. It's coming from my back, not so much from my chest. And this back is stretching, not really this way, it's opening a little bit that way, but it's basically curving downwards like that. And that is correct. That's exactly what you want. So we can refer to this area as a frame, the upper frame of the body. In yoga, they call it a yoke. It's the shoulders, upper chest, or chest and upper back, all working in unison this way. So I'm going to have to stand up for the next little bit. The third simple thing involves bending of the hip joint. And in fact, even the movements that we're talking about here, if you are in the habit of locking your hips and locking your knees and raising your breath, these movements, you can kind of simulate them, but you'll never really get to the opening and the releasing that we're after. So let's just pause for a moment and I'll reset things. We'll come back and we'll talk about this frame, the hips and the waist. Now on to the third simple thing. And because we're talking about simple things to do rather than complex things to do, I'm just going to do it in a position like this called a natural stance. Not going to go into a deep, long stance or anything like that. But this should be sufficient to give us the basics for what we need to do. And I mentioned earlier that if you lock your hips and lock your knees, embrace all this extra tension that locks the entire front of your body, your arms, when you're in this kind of position, can't actually join into your body. So one of the first things that we need to make habitual is that right here, this is the inguinal crease that I'm touching, that we soften this. Okay, now when you first start doing this, it seems quite complex, but basically this is just sitting posture. So when you sit, most of us don't press our bum backwards and we don't push the groin forward. When we sit, we just drop straight down, and that's the requirement here, that the hip joint stays in alignment and it will aid with the rest of the body aligning also. So when we bend the hip, there's actually a pull back in this area as if you've got a heavy weight attached to the coccyx tailbone area. That's being pulled down at the same time that your hip is bent. That makes sure that your entire body can actually root down to your feet, or what we sometimes call ground. Basically, your torso, your upper body, sits on your hips, and your hips have to find a way to sit onto your feet. So today, because we're talking about three things, and the upper frame and arms as well as this frame, we need to talk a little bit about when the shoulders feel as if pulled down, they're pulled onto the hip. Now, if they don't have a landing platform, if you've locked or bent, there's really nowhere for your shoulders to root to. You've lost basic alignment. So when they go straight down, we can then allow our shoulders to become heavy on our hips by imagining that as if pulled down. We get the stretch going out into our arm, and our hips can then sit onto our feet, all fairly simple. So when we get all of these things happening, we've got our hand open, we've got a stretch from the hand to the heavy elbow, we've got a stretch from the shoulder down to the elbow. The chest is a little bit as if being pulled. My back, a little bit rounded outwards right now, but it's also being pulled this way. My head is being pulled up, the neck is pulled up, and along with this release of the shoulder and this raising, big stretches all around this entire area. By doing this kind of a movement, there's stretches all through my arm, and then eventually you get your chest and your back to join in as well. So that movement, that's push, obviously, and if I was in a full stance, you can see the arms going forward and backward without losing any attributes. Quite common to see people in a collapsed position or a two-tense position, and also quite common to see people break their alignment and break their ability to root by raising elbows, raising shoulders. This is usually done because the shoulders don't work very well, but if you can discipline yourself to do the best job you can of this kind of simple movement, then you are able to start translating these kind of motions into other Tai Chi postures. For instance, this arm, the elbow should be heavy also and pointing straight down. This again disconnects my arm, so obviously disconnects my chi meridians. That means that my blood and chi won't flow very well. But in this kind of a position with the elbow, again, very heavy, a little bit of stretch, big stretch here, and everything happening on the front arm, just like we did in our exercise here. So in the article I mentioned that a lot of these can be translated into Qigong movements also, and that's quite true. The Yang 21, for instance, begins with this movement, which is basically what we've been practicing, only it's off on a 45-degree angle, but the attributes remain the same. The shoulders pressing down, the elbows very heavy, the fingers are pointing, actually stretching upwards, like that. Okay, and then we can also translate this into postures that don't look exactly like that, but with only a very minor adjustment of the hand, you can see again that all of these attributes are contained, even in something like wave hands that doesn't, at first glance, it doesn't look at all like this posture. And ward off, very, very similar. When we're doing ward off, the elbow and the shoulder should be very heavy with the hand open, so that even in this position, we have all the same attributes that we would have in this position. And again, you can see this position is not very different. And certainly in terms of principle, it is very, very close to it. So that's it. That's our three simple things. We started with just opening the hands, which by itself is really beneficial, and then creating a stretch from the elbow, which of course feeds into the forearm area where a lot of us need some work, and creating a stretch by making the elbow very heavy and reaching upward at the same time, and then adding the shoulder into the full unit. So now the arms and the upper frame here, they're working very well to get rid of tension and to bring in healing blood and chi. Very, very powerful. Now, we also talked about hips and bending the hips. Even if it's a very small bend, we do need to release this area, and then that allows all of our energies to go through the entire body and improves our posture that much more. So I hope this was helpful. Three simple things, and by practicing these three simple things at any time of day, you can really increase your art, your understanding of the art, and of course you get a huge flow of blood and chi into all the areas that we've been working. So thanks for listening, and hope you enjoy it.